Welcome to Literary Libations with Librarians. This week we are going to be talking about books that we couldn't put down. And we're glad to have you here with us. We hope you listen, we hope you have a little laugh with us, and we hope that you get some great titles to put on your to-read list. So if you do hear about a book that you would like to get your hands on, there are several different ways that you can do that. First of all, you could get a physical copy, the hardcover, paperback, the audio on CD, a large print. You can start putting those requests in on our online catalog. And the good news is, if you haven't heard it already, all branches of the Monroe County Library System are reopening for curbside service on Monday, June 8th. So make sure to contact your branch or check online to see what their hours are going to be. Hours will change with curbside, but it does mean that those items that you've been waiting for the last couple months, those are going to start moving and coming to you again. So that's super exciting news. But of course, even if you can't get your hands on a physical copy, you should be able to get your hands on a digital version. The different apps that we have for that are Overdrive/Libby. If you're looking on your device, you can search by Libby, but Overdrive is the company that created the Libby app. So Overdrive, Libby are the same thing, and they offer ebooks and audiobooks. You can also look for Hoopla, and Hoopla offers ebooks, audiobooks, and also movies, music, and graphic novels. And there is also RB Digital, which offers audiobooks and also magazines, a week-long pass to Acorn TV, and a week-long pass to the great courses. And the great thing with Hoopla and RB Digital is that there is never a wait for any of those items. So if you see it come up on the screen as we're talking about a title that you're interested in and you see that it's available on Hoopla or RB Digital, you can go out there immediately and download those items. So that's our intro about how to get your hands on the books. And this week we've got 5 of us here. And since we're talking about books that we can't put down while we were reading them, for our introduction question this week, we're going to talk about TV shows that we couldn't stop watching. So I'm going to have Kristen Brown, who is a reference librarian at Bedford, go first. And she's going to tell us what TV shows she couldn't stop watching.
All right, so this was kind of a tricky one because there's so many good TV series out right now, but I have to go with What We Do in the Shadows, which is available on Hulu. It's on FX. It's categorized as a mockumentary. It's based off of the 2014 film, and it is about 4 vampires that live together in Staten Island, and they're pretty much horrible vampires. You have Nandor, who was part of the Ottoman Empire. He has a familiar named Guillermo, and Guillermo's one goal is to be made a vampire, and Nandor doesn't treat him very well. It's kind of very bleh. Nadja and Laszlo are from the 1800s, and then there's Colin Robinson, who is an energy vampire, and so all he does at work all day is talk to people, and he just has all these nonsense facts, and so like people just fall asleep. He just sucks all their energy out, and so it's a really, really funny show. Because it's set up like a documentary, there is a crew that follows them around, and so sometimes that crew gets into different predicaments because they are human, and so it's just really funny to see. It's very much like The Office, so if you like The Office, you're into vampires, you like comedy like that, you're gonna love that show. So we binge watched season 1, and then we waited impatiently for season 2, and it just came out, I don't even know, just a little while ago. We just started watching season 2, so I highly recommend What We Do in the Shadows.
Nice. That sounds great. I've not heard of that one, so that's a brand new title to me. So now I got TV to watch, books to read, and work to do. And I don't know how I'm going to get it all done. Also with us this week, we have Jen McCarty, who is a reference librarian at the Ellis branch. And what TV shows can you not stop watching?
I also had a hard time with this because I'm a TV watcher. Like, no apologies. I like TV. So 2 shows that I am always happy when there's new episodes and I can rewatch endlessly. One is Bob's Burgers, which if you're not familiar with it, it's an animated show. It's on Fox, but it's also on Hulu. And it just follows a family that they own their own little burger restaurant, and like, the food is fantastic, but they're not that good. and the whole family is just hilarious. And it's one of those shows that seriously, like if I'm have a half an hour to kill before bed and I just want to watch something, I'm like, my husband will literally come in our bedroom and go, Bob's Burgers. Yeah, I'm watching Bob's Burgers again. It's just funny and it has great music. Like it's just a great show. The other one that I'm obsessed with is Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which was on Fox and then was canceled and then was on NBC and now they're all on Hulu. It's a police station in Brooklyn, obviously, but it's one of those like comedy kind of drama shows that's super funny, but also they do some kind of hard hitting episodes. Like they've tackled LGBT, coming out, that kind of stuff. They've tackled race relations. They've tackled like sexual harassment, really heavy stuff in a comedy. And they do it really, really, really well. And I love Andy Samberg, and he's one of the main people. And the whole ensemble is just incredible. So that is a show that I have rewatched like multiple times already, and it's still on the air. So it makes me happy. I
haven't seen Brooklyn Nine-Nine, much to my chagrin.
It's so good.
When you were saying it combines serious subjects with comedy, that reminded me of Scrubs. And I love Scrubs. So I was like, yep, I can see that. Makes you want to cry and laugh all at the same time sometimes.
And sometimes in the same episode.
Yeah.
So
excellent. All right. We also have with us this week Marsha Langendorfer, a reference librarian and outreach school liaison person from the Bedford branch. And what have you been watching that you can't stop watching?
I like to watch things as well and have been binging also. But I'm gonna choose Arrow. I'm a fan of the DC and Marvel, different ones. What I love about Arrow, if you don't know, Oliver Queen is a billionaire, then he becomes a vigilante. And what I like about it, I just felt like every episode is a cliffhanger. So the good thing is like watching them as they've already been out, so you can just start the next episode. And they also do crossover episodes. So if you like The Flash or Supergirl, they do a lot of crossover episodes. So then you just have more series that you need to watch. So that was on the CW. It's also on other platforms as well. And you can get it from the library too. So it's very, I just kind of like superhero vigilante shows.
It's a never-ending cycle. You start watching one and you're like, oh, now I got to watch this other one. Especially with superhero shows, it seems like there's a new one coming out like every month, and they're all like interconnected. I can't keep track. Man.
Legends of Tomorrow. That's what starts happening, and then the characters are crossing over. So yeah, it's addicting.
And we also have with us this week Jodi Russ, the community librarian at the Bedford branch. And what have you been watching that you can't stop watching, Jodi?
Well, unfortunately, the things I've been watching, I've already finished twice now. So I don't know if I'm just going to watch them again, but they were the things I got the most joy out of. And I would say Sherlock is probably the first one. I had just watched Sherlock right before all this had happened. In fact, probably the last episode we watched after all of this had started, all of the shutdowns had started. And I just went right back to the very first one and watched the whole thing over again because I couldn't get enough of it. Absolutely loved it. But The Office is my old standby though. So I just watched that all the way through for the second time. We just finished that the other day, and both my daughter and I said, now what do we do now? And I think the reason why I love The Office so much is it's just so funny. I mean, everything about it makes you forget about all these other terrible things that are happening. So it gives you a little bit of a break, a little bit of, nonsensical fun. I wish I could be Michael Scott as a boss. Would be just awesome.
I think you should try that.
Yeah, truly, the first time through that series when I was watching it, I was like, oh my, this is horrible. How can he be the supervisor at this place? Oh, it's just terrible. But
oh my gosh.
Then I get the funniness out of it. But Jim and Dwight, and then I've watched all of the SGNs that John Krasinski has done. I don't know if you guys
so good.
Some good news. Oh, they are so fantastic. And when they did that wedding and brought They did I don't know if you're familiar, but they did a wedding. The guy proposed to the woman the same way that Jim proposed to Pam in The Office. And so Jim brought all the characters of The Office back to celebrate these people's wedding, and they did the dance that they do in the church. Oh, you guys need to look up SGN on YouTube if you haven't seen it. It's really, really fantastic. He's sold it to a network now, so that'll be another show to watch when. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, that's my YouTube watch. So.
Some good news is always welcome.
Yes.
For my shows, it was kind of hard. I'm a little obsessed right now with Lock and Key, which is on Netflix, and it is based on a graphic novel series by Joe Hill. And unfortunately, I didn't write down the artist's name. It's Gabrielle something, but it's amazing. The graphic novel series is amazing. It's a horror / fantasy amalgamation. So I was really curious what the TV show was going to be like, and I am really enjoying it. It doesn't match up completely with the graphic novels, but I'm willing to go along for it. I haven't been able to finish it though because my husband doesn't like horror stuff, so I can only watch that when I'm by myself. So I'm through episode 5. I'm about halfway through, but it's been fabulous. But when Mike and I are watching together, we watch British murder mysteries. So we've watched all of the Miss Marples. We're watching the Poirots that are available on Acorn TV. And we're also watching through the Midsummer Murders. So, and those they show on PBS sometimes as well. But so that's what we watch when we're together. I don't know what it is about a cozy little English village and then somebody getting killed that we both seem to enjoy. I don't know. But that's what we've been watching. Yeah, I don't know, you're like cozy. So it gives you that feeling of warmth and then warmth. So there's something for both of us there. So that's what we've been watching. And I don't remember if I said my name. I'm Jennifer Graneski. I am the community librarian at the Dundee Branch Library. All right, so those are our intros. And now we're going to get into our books that we couldn't put down. Who wants to get us started? Volunteers?
Okay.
Kristen, go for it.
Usually last, so I'll start this one. So my 2 books were Caravel by Stephanie Garber and The Rules of Magic by Alice Hoffman. I'll start with Caravel. So this book was suggested to me by a family member, and I am so glad that I picked it up. It's the first one of a series of 3. It's a young adult book, but it is amazing. It's based on the 2 Dragna sisters, and they live with their super cruel father, and their mother left them when they were smaller. And so there's this mystery that kind of surrounds where their mother is. Scarlett has been writing to the Caraval master legend for years, always telling him, please come to my island. Legend is known as this magician, and there's this big myth around him. He's so magical and nobody really knows what he's like, and he's lived forever and he has all these powers, but nobody knows how he got them. And so he does this Caravel, and people participate in it. So if you are the viewer, you are actually a participant also. And so in that aspect, it's kind of close to like a Hunger Games, I guess. And so finally, Legend writes a letter back to Scarlett, and he ends up giving her this ticket to come to Caravel. And so she is so excited. She goes to talk to her sister. Well, there ends up being a conflict with her father and her sister, and so they have to escape off the island, and they end up leaving. Also during this whole thing, Scarlett is promised to a suitor that she's never met, and so she becomes really conflicted because it could be a really good opportunity for her, but she's also very scared because she finally has an opportunity to go to Caravel and to experience that. And so they end up leaving the island, they go to Caravel, they run into Julian. Well, she runs into Julian, and then from there it's like fast-paced, full of twists and turns. So the ending is pretty crazy. I'm not going to get into that, but there's really good complex characters in this book. I fell in love with all of them. There is such an interesting and layered relationship between Legend and Scarlett. And Stephanie Garber has just a way of unfolding this series slowly and really making you think about what's happening within the characters and how they're feeling, but she doesn't leave out details about the area in which things are happening. So while Caraval is going on, she's just giving you all of these sensory words, and so you really experience everything. And so there was not a lull in this book or in this entire series. And so I highly suggest that one. If you're into fantasy, it's not a dystopian thing at all, but if you're into just a general fantasy kind of, I mean, there is like a little bit of romance in there for a young adult book, but it's just overall, it was a really great read. And then from there, I just couldn't wait to get my hands on the other two. And we have all three of those books. I think the last one just came out, what was that, a couple years ago, wasn't it?
Yeah, and
Legendary is the last one. And I think
Legendary is
that one just came out maybe 2 years ago.
It was fairly recent.
Yeah, so highly recommend that book. The next book I'm going to talk about is The Rules of Magic, and this one is actually the prequel to Practical Magic, and in my opinion, it's 10 times better than Practical Magic. So if you've read that book and you really enjoyed it, pick this one up 100%. Alice Hoffman is so amazing at capturing this essence of magic in words. I wanted to be a part of the Owens family reading this book, and I think that's why I couldn't put it down, because the only way that I could have interaction with these characters was if I was reading it. I felt like I was living it. And so it's based around Jet and Franny, which, if you are familiar with Practical Magic, those are the main characters in the book. And so it's them when they are younger, and then you find out that they had a brother named Vincent, and all of them are really unique in their abilities. Their mother has tried to hide the magic side of the family from them. Their father is a psychiatrist, so he's very nonsensical. Like, there's a reason that all of this is happening. That side of the family we don't talk to. Well, Franny ends up turning 17, and there's this tradition in the family, when you're 17 you go and stay with your aunt, and that's kind of what we learn to be like the coming of age as far as being a witch. And so all of the siblings end up going with Franny, and they go to stay with Aunt Isabel. And Aunt Isabel becomes, if you've read Practical Magic, she is the Franny and Jet. So you realize that Aunt Isabel is the beginning of this. And hey,
Real life.
Love live recording.
So there's just so many things. So Franny, Jet can read minds. Vincent, you end up figuring out, is probably the most powerful of them, and so he can see bits and pieces into the future. And just, she talks about the magical ability that Franny and Jet have, and just the reasons why people are weary of that family in general. So she gives obviously a lot of backstory into it because it's a prequel. So you figure out why Vincent is not in Practical Magic, because something happens to him. He gets drafted and he ends up dodging the draft, and something happens to him. But she does really good at stopping at these pivotal moments in the book and really drawing it out so that emotionally you are so attached to it. So she talks about this specific chocolate cake they make on special occasions, and how it's, even in that cake, there's like this magic to it, because they all, like Aunt Isabel made it and they made it, and it was just, they're, even though their mother wasn't hiding the magic from them, she still received this gift from Aunt Isabel every year, and it was this bar of soap, and it's this soap that you have to make at a certain time in the night, and it has all of these magical elements to it, and it makes your skin glow. And so it's almost like, like once you are a witch, you are always a witch, and you can try to deny that, but it's going to follow you and it's going to carry you. And so it touches a lot on the curse that Maria Owens put into place. And then it also touches on Nathaniel Hawthorne, because he was a prominent figure in the Salem witch trials, and all of this takes place in Massachusetts, where Aunt Isabel lives when they go to stay with Aunt Isabel. There's just so many twists and turns and complexities to this book, and this was almost like one of my heartbreaking ones, because I just, every time something happened to these characters, you just, oh, you felt it in your whole being. So I highly suggest that book if you liked practical magic at all, or even if you like any kind of fantasy. And then if you've watched our previous episodes, I was trying to figure out the name of this book because this was one that I had referenced before, and we had found a different title. There is a title that is after this one that it's still before practical magic, but that one focuses on Maria Owens. So if you follow this storyline at all, there is something else after this also that will go back all the way to, the Salem witch trials and focuses on Maria Owens. So that's something to look forward to. That should be coming out later this year. So I'm excited about that as well.
Awesome.
Sorry, that was very long.
Yeah. You had things to say. Now people are like, well, getting on the list for
I
that
can put them down.
And I have to say, I always like hearing about when you were talking about Caravel and said like all 3 books are out now.
Mhm.
I love that because then I feel like, okay, I don't have to try and remember a year from now what happened in the first book.
Yes.
Right.
So that you can read the whole thing all at one time.
And I don't know, I'm curious, Kristen, with Caravel. I loved the first book. I loved Scarlet. Didn't care for her sister.
Yeah.
And the second book is from the sister's perspective.
Yeah.
And I loved her. And I'm like, how did you do this? That the first book I was like, you're a brat. And the second book I'm like, wait, no, you're not. I love you both.
Right? Like she just, and that's funny because when I opened up that second book and I saw that it was about Tella, I was like,
Tella.
like this, like, I don't want to know about Tella. And then you're right, like she just makes you fall in love with her and you're like, man, this girl is awesome.
And then the third book is both of their perspectives.
Mhm.
So good. So good.
Yeah, she did a wonderful job.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right. Who wants to go next with books that they couldn't put down and books that they can't stop talking about?
I can go next.
All right, Marcia.
I actually went with 2 authors and kind of a similar theme throughout for my choices. Both of my authors, Natalie Kogan and Emily Lay, are powerful women that are, they have built their own businesses, they have families. And I think for me, and like Jodi mentioned earlier, during this time, I really wanted something kind of uplifting. And for all of these titles I'm talking about today, I got them on Hoopla and I actually listened to them because they are read by the author. I'm a big fan of books read by the author. I feel like they have inflection and heart and soul poured into them. So if I can get a biography, or in this case, a book about gratitude that's read by the author, I really want to hear their perspective. So the first ones I'm going to talk about are Natalie Kogan, and she wrote Happier Now and Daily Gratitude. So Happier Now, I really like. It's kind of how she came to this whole process, and it's about her history. She was actually a Russian immigrant. So it's very interesting to hear her going from coming from nothing, immigrating here to the US, and some of her experiences and how she really sought happiness throughout a time that was maybe not so happy. And it's very inspiring, and it's really a good lead in how she's built her empire, and it's very inspirational. And then I became addicted to her Gratitude Daily. And I'm pretty sure this was meant to be a book you pick up and read one a day, but I was listening to it and I was just kind of burning through them. But it's basically just that. It's a daily gratitude practice. And I'm big on gratitude anyway. I try to constantly, I've tried to, change my, feeling guilty for having such a wonderful life. I've changed my guilt to gratitude, and these practices were just great ideas. Some of them I've done anyway. My colleague Ashley Lightford and I share Gratitude Daily. She encourages a gratitude journal and just some different things that I never thought of, like even just changing your perspective. Instead of saying oh, I have to go back to work on Monday. You say, I get to go back to work so that I can serve the public again, or I can make money to buy things, or, instead of I have to get groceries, it's like, I get to get groceries so I can nourish myself and my family. It's very simple things. Sometimes it's one day was maybe take a snapshot of the things that you're thankful for and then review those later. Maybe it's your sink for running water or your toilet. I mean, how often are we thankful for our toilets? We're not. And I couldn't be. And so it was really nice to just think of the things that she, a cool one that I liked too was to how you would turn an apology into something to be grateful for. Like instead of just saying, I'm sorry, which seems very, rote, it just kind of comes out. But you could say I'm sorry I was late. I'm sorry that that put you behind, or that I didn't respect your time. You know, and you kind of thank them. Everything has a gratitude spin and just amazing things. One of her experiences as an immigrant was how she had never had a banana before. And she remembered when the first time she had a banana, she literally took a bite, saved it, took a bite so that it would last all day. And one of her gratitude practices as a spin from this is savor something. Don't just rush through it, because we're all multitasking and hurrying, like savor the day. So I just love this. I mean, there's obviously 30 of them. They're amazing. They're great. Even if you don't journal or stick with them, I just think they're really cool to stop and think about. And then along those same lines, my second author that I really liked, Emily Lay, she's the same way. She actually has her own business. She does planners. She does blogs. So if you're really interested, hers are also inspiring. I think I read When Less Becomes More first. It's really great. It's kind of following the whole simplified life KonMari thing. You know, if it doesn't bring you joy, get rid of it. She gives really good tips about, you know, how to just simplify your life and chop it down, and it's wonderful. And they're all kind of that way, as well as Grace Not Perfection. I really liked that. One of her themes throughout that book was very much so like giving, I think especially us as women, or women with careers, you know, or families, and trying to do it all. It was really nice to say, give yourself permission to, you know, have some downtime, to maybe take care of yourself first, to say no more, things like that. And I think we're all sort of guilty of that. So for me, this was a great time for me to stop and feel grateful. With everything going on in the world, you kind of get lost in the negative things. And all of these books by these two authors, I highly recommend. They're very inspiring, feel-good books. And I just felt like I want to just burn through them and read the next thing they had to offer. So I thought they were all very uplifting.
Yay.
Uplifting is good. Gratitude is good. Sometimes it's hard to remember. I have to say, and I am thankful that maybe this was one of the most difficult things I had to deal with during this time. But crisis, homeschool, learning with an 11-year-old. It's hard in those moments to be, I'm so thankful that I have the technology to be able to do this. I'm so thankful for this child that I get to spend more time with. It's hard in those heat of the moments when the technology is not working and the kid's like, I'm over this. I've been over this since it started. So I love that idea of gratitude every day and turning things around that might drive you crazy, but you can be thankful for too. And you can hear our phone going off. I'm in the library branch today, so apologies for that. Who would like to go next? And then I can mute myself and you won't have to hear the phone.
I can go.
All right, Jen.
I was going to say I went first the last several times, so I can,
Yeah.
I can go later today.
Okay, so the two books I'm going to talk about are The Night Circus and Graceling. And I have to laugh because I picked The Night Circus first, and I seriously debated very, very, very hard between The Night Circus and Caraval. And then Kristen picked her books and was like, I'm going to do Caraval because Jen picked The Night Circus.
I saw Night Circus was on there, and I was like, yes, somebody's talking about that book.
So you can kind of see these books are, even the covers are kind of similar. The themes are a little bit similar. They're not the same. They're not, but they have a very similar feel. So The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I almost don't know how to talk about this book. So good. It follows a circus that basically they travel around. It looks like a regular like train, and you know, one day there's an empty field and the next day there's just this amazing circus. And the circus itself it's not a traditional circus, it's magic. So there's tons of illusion, and you know, you walk into one tent and you may be like floating in midair, and there's just all of this just incredibly just unimaginable magic actually happening in the circus. And there's people that you know, spend their whole time following it, trying to find it again, because there's no like rhyme or reason to it. One, you know, it might be here for a week and then it's not back for 10 years. So you have the circus backdrop, which is almost like its own character. And then you have these two magicians basically who don't necessarily know it at first, but they are pitted against each other. Like this entire circus is a backdrop for this magic competition where you have these two young magicians that have basically been trained to go against each other by two older magicians who kind of have a grudge, and there's a lot, you know, there's so many layers to this. And I don't want to like give too much of the plot away, but it's not an, if you are a chronological reader, if you're somebody who wants this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, you may not love this book because it jumps around all over the place. Sometimes like you find out things that are happening before the characters sort of figure that out in their world. But the imagery, the world that you are in this book, it was one of those books that I finished it and went like, how do I read something else now? Like it took me a while to process just the story, the circus itself and the characters and everything. It's just, it's consuming. I wanted to jump on a train and figure out where the night circus was. Like this is a place that you just want to experience. And I love this book so much because of that, because it totally pulls you in and you just want to be a part of what this is offering. So that's the first book. I love, love, love The Night Circus.
Before you move on to your next one, I also am a huge fan of The Night Circus. And I know at one point there was talk that they were going to turn it into a movie, and I was sort of dreading it. Yes. Because it's one of those books where it really, like, everybody's version is going to be their own. And I was like, a movie's going to kill it. Yeah. So, and I don't know if that's still happening or not. I haven't heard
I was like, I have to see if other people have created images based on this book, because your vision is so vivid in your mind. I was like, what are other people getting from this? So I did tons of research to see.
I feel like maybe a TV show, if they could devote enough to it, but still, yeah.
I was just like, I don't know. Have either of you or anybody else read her next book, The Starless Sea?
Not yet.
I have it. It was on the shelf for me the day we closed, and I brought it home, and I haven't opened it.
It's I loved Night Circus more, but if you love her imagery, there's all of that is in there again. She's got tons of wild imagery. The thing to be aware of is like Night Circus is nonlinear. Starless Sea is even more of that. Okay. She talks a lot about game theory and how in video games now are going into you're in your own world. If you played like the old Myst games or some of the newer games where you're walking around and everything that happens is dependent on your choices. Yeah. She talks a lot about game theory in there and ties it into the structure of the novel. So I think it's a little more, it's a little more challenging, but I still, like when I was done with it, I was so glad that I had read it. But I didn't fall in love with it the way I did with Night Circus. So I think if you like Night Circus, you should give it a try.
I wanted to mention, just because I think it's so incredibly crazy. I don't know if you guys know this. She wrote the book as a first draft for NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month. Which
is write it all in a month?
She wrote her first draft in 30 days.
That's crazy.
Nuts. Isn't that crazy?
Go Erin Morgenstern.
Yes, go Erin Morgenstern. So that's The Night Circus. If you haven't read it, it's so good.
Give it a try.
I know we have a book club copy or book club set, so get some friends, check out our book club copy.
Yeah.
Talk about it, because you will have a lot to talk about. So good.
I'm so curious though, do you guys go back and read that book at like a certain time of the year? Like for me, that book is a winter book for me. And so like, I mean, I read it several times a year, but like every winter, going into winter, between winter and fall, like fall and winter, that's my book.
That's your book.
I've only read it twice. I listened to it. Oh, and I think we need to mention this because if you listen to it, the narrator is Jim Dale, who does the Harry Potter books.
He makes
it fabulous.
So
if you love audio,
I haven't listened to it.
I've never read a hard copy. I've only listened to it. I just get the audiobook.
And I've read it twice.
So I've read the hard copy because we did it for book club. And then I loved it so much, I went back and listened to it and was blown away again. So
you can see, we love this book. We
love
it. Okay, my second book is called Graceling by Kristen Kishore. It's also a YA. This is another fantasy, incredible world building. I am a fantasy reader, but I know sometimes fantasy can get very heavy. sometimes fantasy, you think of fantasy as Lord of the Rings or pages, books with 2 appendices and how to pronounce people's names and, 6 maps. This is not one of those books that has that. It's definitely a fantasy, but it's very accessible. It is YA, but I mean, I loved it as an adult. I think any, age from like, 13, 14 up would enjoy this book. So this is set in a world where certain people are born with, they call it grace, which is basically a power of some sort. And you can always tell who has a grace or is a graceling because they have 2 different colored eyes. And so the main character, Kessa, is a graceling, and as far as she knows, her grace is killing. So even though she's a privileged girl from, she's the niece of the king, she should be, kind of I can't think of the word I want to use, but she should be, like a lady of the court or whatever. She's not. She's actually like her uncle's thug because she has this kind of awful grace and she hates it, but it's, what it is. She gets kind of put on a quest and she meets somebody else who has a different grace, and she doesn't quite know what it is, but he makes him a really good match for her, like mentally and physically, more or less. And there's kind of a mystery. There's some weird things happening in this kingdom. There's another person, another king who only has 1 eye. So he's not a graceling, he says, but he only has 1 eye. Gee, I wonder why he doesn't have that other eye. And of course he does have some mysterious power. And what is this mysterious power? And like, there's so much to it in finding out what their powers are, because a lot of them think their power is one thing, or they've been misled. Like Kessa believes her grace is killing, and that's a pretty heavy grace. Hey, I can kill people. That's a lot. I wouldn't want that, but that's maybe not exactly what her grace is. I remember the first time I read this book. I read it a couple times now. It's another one that totally pulls you into the world, and you just want, even though it's a little bit crazy, and there's people with these crazy powers, and obviously there's some violence, and there's death and destruction and all that good stuff. You still kind of want to know more, and you want to just hang out there. So I feel like this is a great starter for somebody who's interested in fantasy but doesn't want to go do Lord of the Rings, because it's a very accessible fantasy. It's totally a different world. She sets up a fantastic new world without being too over the top. And this is another series that Graceling is the first book. The second one is Fire. And then there's a third book called Bitter Blue that's like not directly in line with the series. It kind of has some of the same characters, but I think it goes, it's been a while since I've read it, but it's not exactly the same people, but it's the same world. Just a fantastic, fantastic book that pulls you into this world and this story, and you care so much about these characters, and you just want to see, you want to root for them. You want to see them overcome, the evil king, and you want to see them just grow and become amazing characters. And you feel like they're real.
Has anybody else read Graceling?
Well, I was going to ask you if it was a series, because I think I read Fire, but I've never read Graceling.
Yeah, all 3 of the books, they're like connected, but they're not direct.
There's a joke with that, sorry.
Like, something's going on. I missed something somewhere, I think.
Kristen's nickname may have been Fire at one point. We'll leave it there.
Back in the day.
Back in the day.
Yeah, those are really fun books.
Excellent. Good. Because I remember when those came out, it seemed like there was a lot of people around me that read a lot of YA that talked about those books a lot. And I just never managed to read them.
And it's, I think YA sometimes turns people off. I know fantasy turns people off. YA gets kind of a bad rap, I think, sometimes, especially when you have a female protagonist and you kind of get this. I know a lot of them and they do it. It's, YA, you're just kind of waiting for the main character to do something stupid so you can go, why? Why did you do that?
Stop doing that.
But these characters are so well written, and so I never felt like that, I mean, yeah, teenage girls do dumb stuff. We've talked about that. It's what we do. But you know, hey, being in a fantasy world, we know where your gift in life is to kill people. It's a little bit different.
You got to think before you do stuff, probably.
You know, but it's so good, and it's so fun watching like the different graces, and you know, seeing what these sort of gifts are. Some of them are not like hers. It ends up not being at all what she thinks it is, and then it totally changes her perception of what this gift is and who she is, because she's been she's been turned into this thug basically for her uncle. You know, hey, so and so's giving me trouble, go take care of that for me. It's not who she wants to be, but just so good.
Excellent. All right, and Jody, what books did you choose as your unputdownable reads?
So I chose things that were quite different from what everyone else chose. I would say one of mine's a relatively mainline fiction kind of read, and the other one is a classic. So I'm going to start with that one, which was an Agatha Christie novel. I love mysteries anyway. Mystery is my preferred genre, and that tends to be the things that I read. So the title that I chose was And Then There Were None, which used to be called 10 Little Indians, and now it's called And Then There Were None. It is available in e-audio in Hoopla and Libby, and as an ebook in Hoopla. And I reread this recently because my daughter had to read something from this genre for high school, and this happened to be the title that she picked. And so I wanted to remember what it was like. And so this book was originally published in 1939, and very much like Arthur Conan Doyle's work, which I talked about last week, it never goes out of style or print. Agatha Christie is just very easy to read mysteries. Like, they read very quickly, but they're also, she's really good at surprising you. It's one of those, I read so many mysteries that I've figured out what's going to happen in the story halfway through the story, and then it's so disappointing. And she's really not like that. So this particular title, 10 people are invited to stay in a mansion on a deserted island. Each one of them has something to hide or something to fear, and one by one they share their secrets, and one by one they're found dead. So who's killing them off, and will anyone survive? Christie's writing style is exactly what drives this to be a page turner. You really just have to know what happens next. So I totally, I didn't read a whole bunch of her other titles, which I kind of meant to do at the time, but I have so many things on my list to read that, you know, I didn't get to more, but this was a really good story. The other thing that I really like about going back to a classic like that is when you read things like that, you realize how many other books, how many movies, and how many TV shows like these have an influence on. And as you're reading those, you're like, holy mackerel, that's really cool. You know, like one of my favorite instances of that is in The Count of Monte Cristo. He escapes by being in a casket at one point, and in Pirates of the Caribbean, Captain Jack Sparrow escapes in a casket. So, you know, it's just one of those kinds of things that classic literature leads to lots of other things. So the other thing that I picked is an author, and I picked this for a couple of reasons. First of all, the author is Charles Todd. The interesting thing about Charles Todd is it is actually a mother-son writing duo. So his mother, Caroline, helps him write these stories. And the character that I'm mostly going to focus on is Ian Rutledge. There's actually 22 titles in this series by Charles Todd. So there's a lot to read and or listen to. One of the reasons I first started listening to him is because Simon Preble is the narrator of the audiobooks. I literally will listen to anything Simon Preble reads. He is glorious to listen to if you like a guy with an English accent. So that's one of the reasons I got started on this. But 22 books in the title. They're available as, the first title is called A Test of Wills. That's available as an ebook on Hoopla, but most of the rest of the series are available as e-audios on Hoopla. This is a point where I can point out one of the cool things about Hoopla. One of the things that I really enjoy as a person who reads series and makes these kind of binge listening books for me is Hoopla has this feature that when you're almost done with a book, I'm about 5 minutes from the end of this particular book, it says, hey, you're almost finished. Would you like to borrow the next title? And if I just click on yes and click on download, by the time the book I'm listening to has finished, I've got my next book downloaded and ready to listen to. And I've done that a lot with the Ian Rutledge books. And so that's part of why I wanted to talk about this. It's one of the neat things. Charles Todd also has a female, so Ian Rutledge, see, I got carried away now. Ian Rutledge these stories are set in the United Kingdom following World War I. Ian Rutledge is a war veteran who works for Scotland Yard. He's suffering from PTSD, which at the time was known as shell shock and was one of those things that people felt they had to hide back then because other people just thought they were crazy and wanted to not have anything to do with it. And so Ian Rutledge has the voice of Hamish MacLeod in his head. He's one of the soldiers that was in his unit who died, and he accompanies him everywhere he goes. It's like he's sitting in the back seat of his car. He's always in his mind as he's doing his work. Rutledge holds himself tightly in check while he's pursuing a murderer, and eventually realizes that the work of the present and future is what will help him deal with the past. And so Hamish sticks with him through all of these books. It feels like he's a necessary character to help Rutledge through what he's trying to figure out in the murder mysteries. But it's interesting how that all plays out and is all part of the stories. In addition to the Ian Rutledge series, Charles Todd and his mother has also written a series with a female character, Bess Crawford, who is a nurse during World War I, who also solves murder mysteries. And there's 11 titles in that series. So there are plenty of good things to read and listen to by Charles Todd.
I knew the author sounded familiar, and it didn't click why until you just said that, his other series. I've read a couple of those. Yeah,
and both of those, if you need to know this, many of you out there like to know this, they don't have much language, they don't have any sex in them. Like, if you want a clean story about historical events, it's interesting to listen to these.
I love mysteries. That's one of my favorite genres too. And I love Agatha Christie, anything Agatha Christie. And I love that almost all of them are available on Hoopla. Mm-hmm. So if I don't know what I want to listen to, I'll just go in and look up Agatha Christie and download one of those.
I did not realize, obviously I knew that her books were older, but I did not realize that was that old.
Yeah, those were a long, long time ago.
And she has a really, like,
and they stand up, like,
right.
Agatha Christie is still awesome.
Right. Yeah. My 15-year-old daughter enjoyed reading it. I feel like if a 15-year-old and a 50-something-year-old can enjoy the same book, then it's got to be a pretty good
awesome.
Book.
Yeah.
But they do read fast, and that's part of the benefit for her, from her perspective, was it reads fast. It was easy for her to read, easy for her to understand. It didn't have a lot of, for a story that was written that long ago, it didn't have parts of it that were not understandable to kids who live today, right?
Yeah, right.
She can still feel very contemporary at times when you go back and listen to them or read them.
Yeah.
And she herself, like, I don't know if any of the rest of you have heard this, her life was very interesting, but there was also a portion where she went missing for, I don't remember how long, but it was like a week or 2 weeks, and like it was in the newspapers, like she couldn't be found. And as far as I know, nobody's ever really said what was going on during that time period. I only know this because there's been a couple of movies made about those missing weeks of Agatha Christie's life and what she was doing. And some of them are kind of sad, and some of them are like, she was out solving a mystery, of course. So, but she's really fascinating. All right, so now my unputdownable reads. If you can see my background here, this should give you a clue about one of them. If you picture a small boy riding a tricycle down that hallway, that's,
I know, I'm like, can't run.
So yeah, that's one of mine. Oh, Jody's hiding her face because she doesn't want to hear this. So yes, The Shining by Stephen King. I am a Stephen King fan. I think he just writes stories that you fall into. He makes you believe things that you know aren't real and can terrify you with them. And sometimes my escape from reality is an escape into this terrifying world. And then I'm so relieved when I'm done reading it. Reality seems awesome. So I don't know if that, I've heard that's one of the reasons why some people read horror. There's a lot of philosophy out there. But anyways, The Shining, if you don't know, centers on Jack Torrance and his small family, his wife and his son. And Jack is having a hard time in his life. He's got some personal demons, but he manages to get this job as the caretaker at the Overlook Hotel, which is in Colorado. And during the winter, the roads to the hotel become unpassable. So the hotel shuts down during the winter, and the only people living there are the caretaker and his family. There's a history of the caretakers not doing that great at the hotel, and some violent things have happened. But Jack is sure that's not going to happen. He's got his wife, he's got his son, he's got a book that he wants to get written. It's going to be great. Well, needless to say, it's not great. One of the reasons why I happen to put this in my unputdownable category is because of the time and the place when I read it. I decided the best time to read The Shining would be when friends and I, when I was teaching out in California, went and stayed at a cabin in Yellowstone. That's a good idea. Hey, let's go stay at this secluded place. We were able to use it because a family let us as 2 teachers use it for, I think it was spring break. So sure, Penny, you want to go to this cabin? Yes, of course. I was terrified on the way there because the highways and roads going in and out of Yellowstone, I'm like, we're going to go over the edge. I have a fear of heights. We finally get there and I crack open The Shining because that's going to be the perfect book to read. And so needless to say, it's like 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm still reading The Shining because I got to get to the end because I don't want to give anything away. But one of the amazing things about Stephen King's books is they almost always end hopefully. Doesn't mean everything turns out hunky-dory and is wrapped with a ribbon, but usually there's some hope at the end. So I was like, well, we got to get through this and make sure everything turns out okay. So I'm turning the pages, and so it's like 1 or 2 in the morning, and then Penny comes running into my room going, there's something in my room. There's something in my room. I can hear it. And so then we go creeping down the hallway into her room, and you can. There had to have been like a mouse or a raccoon or something because you could hear scratch. So needless to say, Penny stayed in my room that night and I stayed up all night and read The Shining. So it was truly unputdownable. So, and if you just love, yes.
I get in the car and I'm out. Yeah. Bye-bye.
We just gotta leave. So no, it was a great trip and it's a great book. And so that's my story about The Shining. If you've seen the movie, I also am a fan of the movie, but I will let you know Stephen King is not. He was not a fan of Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. So you can read that. There's like documentaries and stuff about The Shining movie. So that's The Shining.
Can I say a couple things about that really quick too, about Stephen King?
Absolutely.
I was so excited you chose him. First, I thought you were going to say you picked The Shining during the stay-at-home order because it seems very similar to, being locked up.
Yeah.
The other tie-ins that I really liked, I also love Stephen King, read anything by him. On Hoopla, if you listen to him, most of his recent books are read by Will Patton. If you're not familiar with him, he's an actor from like The Postman or Armageddon, and he reads them so, I'm scared to death listening the way Will Patton. So I'm really a big fan of anything by Stephen King, read by Will Patton or just in general. Also, I love Stephen King's biography on writing. It's called On Writing, and it's amazing. It tells how he got the phone call when his first, when Carrie was picked up and just how things transpired with his life. And it's really great if you're a fan. And Jennifer, I thought you would say this, so I waited. When you talked about your TV series by Joe Hill.
I forgot to say that. I was just thinking in my head, I need to share that.
Yeah, share it now.
So Joe Hill is Stephen King's son. So if you didn't know that, Joe Hill has written The Heart-Shaped Box, which is fabulous and is an awesome listen. And I kind of think maybe Will Patton read The Heart-Shaped Box because it's somebody with a gravelly voice. He wrote Horns, which don't watch the movie, but the book is really good. There's another one with it's a dystopian, I can't think of the name, but they get fire tattoos on
is that The Passage?
No,
No.
that's not, no. I feel like running to the shelf right now and going, it's this one, but I can't remember it. But if you look up Joe Hill, it'll have the cover and it's got gold on it. I'm also a huge Joe Hill fan, if you can't tell. I think he's fabulous too. So he clearly, I can't imagine what it would be like growing up with Stephen King as your dad.
Well, and then Tabitha King.
Like, I'm sure he's like a lovely, normal man,
But they all write, because his wife Tabitha's an author also. So it's really funny. I feel like they must just be sitting around feverishly writing novels in their home. So I kind of want to live it.
I want to go see what's going on in the King household.
I know my nephew just went to Maine and sent me a picture of his house. And then I was like, no, I've got to go. I've got to go see his house. So anyway, I was glad you picked Stephen King. I love him. So
My cousin lives, or she doesn't now, but when she first moved to Maine, she lived in Bangor. And at the time, I don't think Stephen is there very much these days. I think he's mostly like in Florida. But she said, like, you know, she went out there for college, and like a lot of professors would say, like, oh, don't be surprised if you just see Stephen King like at the grocery store. It's not a big deal. Don't be weird. Don't make it weird.
I totally would be weird. Like, I probably wouldn't go up to him, but I'd totally be the person he'd see out of the corner of his eye going.
And he's a huge fan of libraries. The Bangor Public Library, I believe he like funded a lot of the build. So
that's awesome. We love you, Stephen King, and also Joe Hill. All right, and my other book is The Golem and the Genie. And I don't know if any of the rest of you have read this, but it is fabulous. I can't say enough about this. It's by Helene Wecker. And I'm just going to go back. I read this a few years ago, and I'm going to go back. I looked at my review that I had written on Goodreads at the time, and I feel that it pretty much says it all. So at the time, right after I read this, I said, loved it. Completely absorbing, unique story, characters I cared about and who felt alive and real, plus a great setting with loads of folklore and mythology thrown in. I actually dragged out reading the last 50 pages of this book over several days because I didn't want it to end. So, oh, there goes our phone again. So a quick summary, it's a golem, which is a mythical Jewish creature, and a genie, a mythical Arabic creature. They meet in the 19th century New York City and discover their souls. So good. As I said before, great plot, great characters, great setting, and unique story that does exactly what a story is supposed to do. It draws you in completely and thoroughly, yet also reflects back some piece of truth about what it means to really live. And this story did that for me. This is Wecker's first novel, but I hope she writes more. So that was my review at the time. I still stand by that. I did go and look after going back and looking at this title. I was like, well, did she write more? And she hasn't. So I hope she's out there somewhere working on her next magnum opus, because I'm going to read it as soon as I can. And it's just absorbing. It's a wonderful story, and you should read it. And I really think fans of things like The Night Circus or Caraval, if you haven't read this one, I think you're going to pick it up and love it.
I just wrote it down. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'm hooked.
So those are my two unputdownable books. So thank you, everybody, for sharing your unputdownable books. And next time we are going to be talking about books that broke your heart. So be thinking about those books that you're like, oh my goodness, this hurts my heart in some way. Doesn't mean the whole book had to leave you sad. You still could end up hopeful. But at some point in the book, you're like, I'm feeling this one. I've got all the feels over this book right here. So we'll be talking about that next time. Thank you to everybody who listened to us. Thank you to all of you for coming and sharing your reads. And I hope you all have great weeks. And I hope you call your local library and start using our curbside service starting on Monday. Thank you. Bye.